This podcast is brought to you by eBiz Radio, the place to go if you want to know about the world of business. For daily podcast and article uploads, go to ebizradio.com or follow us on Twitter at ebizradioglobal. My name is Nick Snow, and joining me for the first edition of TechnoBiz for 2015 is Arthur Goldstuck. Arthur, thank you very much for taking the time to chat to me once again. I trust your new year got started well, and some great news in the tech environment. Of course, the Consumer Electronics Show, which was 2015, of course, in Vegas, and what new technology that is going to bring to us here in South Africa. So once again, thanks for joining us, and tell us a little bit more.
Our pleasure, Nick, and Happy New Year to listeners as well. It's actually been a great start to the year in terms of getting a sense of what's coming and also seeing what's been launched already. So the tech year kicks off every year with the Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas, and they have several thousand products being launched every year. This year, the tally was 3,600 new products. So I promise I won't go through all of those with you. More interesting than the products themselves are the categories that really set the market alight and that represent the most new devices, but also the most usable, interesting, and effective devices in making our lives better, whether it's our working lives or our personal life.
Yes.
So first, you just mentioned the themes that dominated, and there were quite a few themes that were huge this year, starting with the Internet of Things. So the way I cast that is, here comes everything that you can imagine, or here comes every connected thing that you can imagine. So what they were really saying is that all devices that have a computer chip in it now also have some form of communications built into it.
Yes.
Not necessarily the ones we have in our homes at the moment, but those that are coming. It will be very rare to find a computer chip-enabled device. It's not a communication-enabled device. Whether it's Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, NFC, or even radio frequency, or the beacons that are being planted at the moment, those are all going to be pervasive, one or the other, in one or another device that you're going to be buying this year. The result of that is that you'll be able to connect almost anything to almost anything else if you have the right platform for it. So that's going to be one of the big trends this year, is people creating platforms for the Internet of Things. And when I say people, I mean the big corporations, the big tech companies.
So we're looking at a bit of ecosystem development as well, because I know Microsoft has just released and is going to release Windows 10, and they're kind of bringing their whole ecosystem together. So we're going to be seeing a lot of that. Precisely.
So a key part of Microsoft's whole cloud platform, the Azure platform, is going to have to be the interconnectedness of things. And the new version of Windows is going to have to be fairly closely intertwined with that. And then you have the mobile manufacturers, Samsung, for example, announcing at CES in one of the keynote addresses that they're going to be heavily focused on the Internet of Things. They're, in fact, specifically investing $100 million in the coming year in new applications for the Internet of Things. So that's going to have a massive impact as well. And then, of course, you'll have people like IBM on the software side or the services side. You'll have the various other manufacturers on the smartphone and computer side of things. And then you're going to have numerous platform providers like the cloud people, for example, VMware and VM and guys like that, along with the Microsofts of the world, are going to ensure that their cloud buzzwords go hand in hand with Internet of Things buzzwords. So the question then is, which things? And that's where all the other technologies and big themes of CES came into play. So among other things, automotive was very big this year. It was the first time they had double-digit in terms of number of automotive companies at CES. There were 12 car companies there. And what a lot of them did was they preempted the following week's Detroit Motor Show, where car companies usually unveil all their new releases, their new technologies, etc. A lot of the technologies, especially relating to connected cars, were unveiled at CES instead of waiting for the Detroit Motor Show. And that was a real shift in the way car companies see the world, but also
Absolutely.
the way consumers see cars. Cars are now part of the device environment and not part of merely the transport environment. And that ties into the Internet of Things again. So the extent to which your technology will start interacting with your car in the future is starting to become visible. And now, the other side of the automotive technology was self-driving cars, or what they call autonomous cars, and that is a big theme as well. Quite a few companies either showing off autonomous cars, Mercedes-Benz and Audi in particular, and others talking about the future of the autonomous car.
Do you think we're actually going to get there? Autonomous cars?
It's already on the way there.
But then I'm thinking, as robots, I mean, it's very easy for a bunch of robots to drive on the road or a bunch of humans to drive on the road. But what about mixing the two together? Because you're still going to get that impatient human.
Well, the idea is that you have an assisted car. In other words, you have a human in the car who keeps an eye out on what the car is doing. But generally speaking, the car is actually far, let's say, safer way of going than the human is in terms of the control of the car. So all the sensors that will be built into cars, all the parameters, all the algorithms will combine in a way that the human eye and brain just cannot eventually. So the idea is that the autonomous car will actually be a safer car than the human-driven car.
Oh, well, they'll look forward to it.
Google have had autonomous cars driving on the roads for quite a long time now, and it's been an experiment. They had to get a special license for it, but they've proven that it can be done. And what they also then did for CES was Audi adapted one of their vehicles. They call it Jack. And Jack drove from San Francisco to Las Vegas, arriving there prior to CES to show that it can be done.
Oh,
and they had a variety of passengers on board on various parts of the trip, kind of assisting, but really leaving it to Jack to manage the whole route. So you're seeing it already happening, cars interacting with, driverless cars interacting with cars that have got these human beings controlling them. I think I'd feel safer with robots controlling the cars.
Yes, because we all know that humans are always going to have that superiority complex where they're going to think, no man, this machine doesn't know what it's doing. And we've seen it with GPSs.
Exactly.
Of course, everyone gets a GPS, but does anybody actually follow the GPS? No.
And there's one other thing. Robots, until now, have not been shown to demonstrate road rage. So that will certainly also make us feel a little more calm in the traffic. Especially for rush hour traffic, I think autonomous vehicles are really the way to go, and you can get on with your work while the traffic looks after itself. So that's the second big category. The next big one was smart homes, the connected home, in other words. It's really still a matter of putting expensive plugs and monitors and sensors around the house and controlling it by remote control.
Yes.
But eventually we'll get to the science fiction idea of a real smart home that adapts itself to your activities and presence.
I saw a little bit. I saw a little bit about this phone where you could add different blocks onto the back and kind of construct your own one. Are we going to see anything like that?
That's an experiment by Google at the moment. I suspect we will see variations on that theme in the coming years. But for now, it's still very expensive to put that out. And the average person doesn't want to still figure out how to construct their phone. They want a phone that just works. That's the bottom line of consumer technology. It must simply work. And not for the techie, because a lot of techies like to use that phrase, but it works. Except they've got it to work. The consumer doesn't want to get it to work. They want it to arrive out of the box working. So that's why the modular phone is not a serious contender at this stage. In the future, maybe. Then the next very big category was TV display, and especially 4K TVs, ultra high definition, in other words, and that is basically 4 times the quality or the density of the line density of traditional high definition TV. So superb pictures. And what you're now seeing is everyone playing with the formats and with the prices. So you have curved TVs, a number of them now on the market. 2 years ago, curved was the new black. Last year, flexible curved was the new black. This year, it's curved in every size that you want and at every price point that you want. So what's happening now is that 4K is finally taking off. The sales of 4K TVs in the United States are more than doubled in the past year. And that finally tells us it's beginning to happen. And we can start expecting to see 4K TVs in our stores at almost accessible price points. They're still going to be a little too expensive to justify. But if you think about it, the ultra-high definition TVs are now coming down in price. Sorry, not the ultra-high definition. The 3D TVs are now coming down to a price that's closer to where a few years ago we were paying for just large screen TVs.
Yes.
So we can expect to see the 4K and the curved TVs coming down in price rapidly over the coming few years. Just probably not this year, but watch for brands like Hisense, who are bringing lower cost devices with the same high specs as all the other manufacturers.
Right. Yes.
And then the other big names there are Samsung and LG, who dominate the 4K TV environment. But the cool thing is that you're going to be able to see the technology locally in the course of this year across a range of sizes and formats, as opposed to seeing one isolated, hideously expensive device on the shop floor. So those are some of the key ones. I've left the most significant one to last, and that is wearables. So wearables were everywhere. They dominated CES.
And they'll continue to do so.
They will continue to grow and continue to make a massive impact. But where they make the most impact and where we're going to see it in South Africa to the largest extent is in fitness and activity monitoring devices. So something like the Fitbit or the Jawbone or the Samsung
the Galaxy
Smart Band or the Sony Smart Band and the Samsung Galaxy Gear Fit, for example. Where we won't see it in a big way in this country is the smart watches. So smart watches are the most visible form of wearables, but also the most expensive. And no one wants to pay 4,000 Rand for a watch that is going to be obsolete a couple of years from now. When I say nobody, I mean nobody in their right mind. Insane people will buy smart watches at 4,000 Rand plus, especially when Apple brings out their Apple Watch in the course of this year. But the real wearable revolution is not in smart watches, it's in fitness devices.
I was going to say, it's going to be very difficult for things like the Apple Watch and the Galaxy smartwatch to take off when you've got just greater compatibility across devices with something like a Fitbit.
Exactly. And the weird thing, I did a TV interview on Morning Live on SABC a week ago where Leanne Manis interviewed me about the trends shaping technology in the coming year.
Yes.
And I pulled up my sleeve to show her my Fitbit as an example of something that was already changing my life and was unobtrusive. And then she pulled up her sleeve and showed me hers. She was wearing the exact same Fitbit
Brilliant.
Device. And I thought that is so symbolic of how quickly it's going mainstream and the potential impact it's going to have in this country this year already.
So you're seeing a greater community of people really focusing on their health, not only with diets, but now with actual technology using it as well.
Yes, and it's not only the technology that is available, it's also a tremendous growth in health consciousness across the world, but also in South Africa. And what you tend to see is when the technology becomes available at a reasonable price or in a way that's not difficult, complex, expensive, or obtrusive, then people take to it. So prior to the fitness bands taking off, you started having activity monitoring on phones themselves, and you got apps that took advantage of the accelerometer and the gyroscope that was coming into the higher-end phones. And Samsung then, with their S4, had something called HealthMate on it, which included something called a Walkmate. And a lot of people, for the first time, because it was built into the phone, it was easy to use, it was intuitive as well as accessible in the most uncomplicated way. They began using those tools as pedometers, as activity monitors, etc. And because target setting is such an important part of it, you find a lot of people actually setting targets for themselves to become far more active. That was just a rough and ready approach to it, because you slowly carry the phone for it to have that effect.
Yes.
It wasn't going to work for you in gym, for example. Now along comes a fitness band and does the same thing, reports back to your phone or to your computer for that matter. You don't have to link it to a phone. Plus, it links into things like medical aid incentives, like Discovery Vitality, for example. You get bonus points for tracking your activity and feeding it back into their system.
Right, that's brilliant.
So when you have that incentive and it doesn't cost too much, then it's an absolute no-brainer. It's blindingly obvious it's going to take off and explode in a way that smartwatches simply cannot.
Absolutely. So as we kind of come to the end of what's new for 2015, any last item that may have stood out that we can really see making an impact this year?
One other category is 3D printing, which is not going to become mainstream for the average consumer, but where it is going to take off and become mainstream is in various professions, especially those that depend on design. So there I'm talking about architects in particular, but there's a range of other categories as well. Ad agencies are going to find it useful. Even doctors, dentists, and designers of specialist products like prosthetics, for example, will find it invaluable. And it's not only because of the fact that you can print out this model in your office. It's because there's a growing library of devices, objects, and the like that you can print out. And there's a growing community of people around the world who are producing templates that they are happy to share with others around the world. And professionals will find themselves either sharing or trading or buying from each other in this regard. And then the final thing, the thing I find the most exciting, is that architects, for example, can collaborate with each other around the world. Architects, artists, designers, product designers, etc. And they can send the software or the template of the design to someone on the other end of the world. They can print it out there, have a look and see what they like and don't like about it, make modifications, send it back, almost like marking up a document, except you're marking up a physical object by using a 3D printer.
Just brilliant.
The possibilities are endless. Those are just some that I've thought of off the cuff. I'm sure there are hundreds, even thousands of potential uses of 3D printing for professionals at this stage.
Yes.
And for businesses.
Most definitely.
That, are going to bring the technology into its own.
Absolutely.
What we're seeing in South Africa at this stage is very expensive 3D printers becoming available in stores already. One of the local distributors, Electron, has got the agency for MakerBot, which is the sort of leading brand in 3D printing. And they're starting to distribute MakerBot commercially in South Africa, and you're seeing it in stores. And that will also awaken people's awareness of what the possibilities might be.
Yes.
And many people will find they have a good reason to get one of those.
Yes, no, most definitely. So a final question for you as we close off this podcast. What would you recommend customers invest in terms of technology this year to make sure that they're ahead of the curve?
My suggestion is don't try to be ahead of the curve, because the first iterations of any new technology tend to be too expensive with too little utility. So when you see a new technology arrive, wait for it to mature a bit. That's why, again, the fitness and activity devices, that's right now, because they've matured over several years, they're now completely mainstream, and you can choose based on what your budget allows, what kind of functionality you want.
Brilliant.
So that's one area. But what's more significant about that is by investing in one of these, you're also investing in yourself, because you're investing in health. I sound like a commercial, but it's true. the best investment anyone can make is in their own well-being.
Absolutely. Now, I think sound words, and maybe something that people should take into this new year. It brings us wonderfully to the end of this edition of TechnoBiz. Arthur, thank you very much once again for taking the time to chat to me on eBiz Radio.
Thank you, Nick.